I am joined by Dr. Summers, Dr. Larry Summers, former Treasury Secretary, knows his way around an economic crisis. A lot of talk on Greece here. Does this feel different from any of the crises that you were at the helm for?
Every situation is different. This Greek situation, it'll be much better if they can work it out in some way. Both sides are going to have to move. Greece has got to get more serious and determined and clear on what the reforms it's going to take. That's not going to be politically easy for its leadership. But the Europeans need to recognize that there are limits to the degree of austerity that can be imposed, and that ultimately debt problems get solved through growth. They don't just get solved through austerity. And they're going to need to work with the Greeks on a strategy for growth. I hope and I expect, but there's far from a certainty, that something will get worked out.
At this summit?
No, not at this summit. The Greeks aren't at this summit. But I think there is some time left, and with good spirit on both sides and looking into the real abyss that it would be for Greece if this doesn't work out, and this terribly risky situation that it would be for Europe if this doesn't work out, I am hopeful that common ground will be found.
Does that mean that there's a risk of contagion beyond Europe then, for the U.S., for global growth? It seems like we're talking about contagion in this crisis different from the previous ones.
I don't think anybody knows. People couldn't have imagined that a $4.5 billion hedge fund like LTCM could bring the financial system to a halt. Ben Bernanke, wise as he was, famously said that subprime was no big deal on a systemic basis. There were many who believed that the world was ready and cushioned for what happened at Lehman, and how wrong they were. So I think seeing a Greek failure and seeing what its contagion consequences are is an experiment that no one should want to run.
Do you get the sense that that view is shared within the U.S. administration? Are they pressing enough? Are they doing too much, too little?
I'll leave the U.S. administration to speak for itself and to set its own course. There are a lot of people there with a lot of experience and skill, and I know they're very much aware of the stake that the United States has in successful growth in Europe.
One thing the U.S. has weighed in on, and that is the value of the renminbi. The IMF has declared that it is now accurately valued. What's your view?
Look, I think the U.S. policy has had a real triumph here. The renminbi is up by 50% in real terms on against all China's trading partners since the days when it had a 10% trade surplus. It's about a 2% trade surplus right now. That's in the range of what happens to countries. And so I don't think there's the kind of systemic undervaluation problem that there was. And I don't think that happened automatically. I think that was a tribute to the economic diplomacy of President Obama, of Secretary Geithner, and many others. But I think it's time to recognize that that's no longer the kind of issue for the global economy that it once was. And I'm a believer that the exchange rate manipulation issue is a very serious one, and it's one the United States has to take very seriously. But I think if we're going to be credible in taking it seriously, we also need to have the courage to recognize when there have been major adaptations. Now, that doesn't mean, Hans, that you can't argue about what exactly the right value is, but that's not the kind of problem that we used to have. Nobody could argue before. Now you can argue about the right rate.
One final quick question. What's the role of the G7? Can you have an economic summit without China, without Brazil?
Sure you can. There are crucial issues facing Europe, facing the United States, and facing Japan. Top among them for me is secular stagnation. The fact that the growth recovery from this recession has been manifestly inadequate, and working out what to do about it for the industrial world should be a primary preoccupation here. We're not going to solve any other problem, whether it's inequality, whether it's chronic budget deficits. No other problem are we going to solve unless we're able to accelerate growth.